By Matt Citak. The 2017 NFL season has been rather unpredictable thus far. From a slew of injuries to significant fantasy football players, to rookie running backs bursting onto the scene, to average veteran quarterbacks suddenly looking like studs, it feels like we have seen it all in the first 2 weeks of the season. And yet, we still have 15 weeks to go. Strap in, folks, it's going to be an interesting season. Here are Week 3's fantasy football starts and sits. Starts: QB, Cam Newton, Carolina Panthers. The season has not started the way Newton would have liked. While leading Carolina to a 2-0 record against the 49ers and Bills, the quarterback has amassed only 399 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception through 2 games. It is clear the shoulder he had surgery on during the offseason is still not 100%, but each week Newton looks a little more comfortable on the field. This week, Newton has the pleasure of facing New Orleans and their Swiss cheese secondary. The Saints have given up 25.5 and 30.8 fantasy points to Sam Bradford and Tom Brady, respectively, and have surrendered league highs in completion percentage, passing yards, and touchdowns on throws at least 15 yards downfield. Newton has done well when targeting his receivers downfield, and with Greg Olsen out for a while, he will need to rely on his receivers a lot more. The Saints couldn't be a more perfect matchup to get Newton back on track. QB, Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions. Stafford did not put up a monster game against the Giants on Monday, but a big reason for that was the game's script. The 29-year-old attempted just 4 passes in the second half due to Detroit having the lead and New York's stifling pass defense. Still, Stafford threw for 2 touchdowns on a 71.4 completion percentage and has a very appetizing matchup this week. The Lions will welcome the Atlanta Falcons to Detroit on Sunday in what should be a very high-scoring affair, and I fully expect Stafford and Matt Ryan to put on a show. Stafford's 6 touchdowns is currently tied with Trevor Siemian for the league lead, and the Lions' QB is likely to add a few more to his total against a weak Atlanta secondary. QB, Jay Cutler, Miami Dolphins. Let me preface this by saying I would only start Cutler if you're looking for a streaming option at quarterback this week. That said, Cutler has a fantastic matchup as he faces his new divisional rival, the New York Jets. The Jets allowed over 19 fantasy points to both Tyrod Taylor and Derek Carr in the first 2 weeks of the season, with the latter completing 82.1% of his passes for 3 touchdowns. At this point in his career, Cutler is certainly not as good as Carr. But even so, the 34-year-old threw for 230 yards with a 72.7 completion percentage against the Chargers and their surprisingly solid secondary last week. Cutler is still rather new to the Dolphins' offense and should continue to improve the more he gets accustomed to the system. The Jets have allowed the 5th highest rate of touchdowns per drive this season, which means Cutler and the Dolphins' offense should have a field day on Sunday. RB Isaiah Crowell, Cleveland Browns. If you're like me and drafted Crowell early in your fantasy football drafts this year, you have to be disappointed with his performance thus far this season. 27 carries for 70 yards is hardly what you want to see out of one of your starting running backs. However, it's important to keep in mind that while those numbers are rather awful, Crowell was facing 2 of the league's better run defenses in the Steelers and Ravens. But in Week 3, the Browns go on the road to take on the Indianapolis Colts and are actually favored for the first time since Week 14 of the 2015 season. If the Browns are able to control time of possession, Crowell should get a heavy workload on Sunday. While the start of his season has not been pretty, this week starts a 3-week stretch where he gets to face the Colts, Bengals, and Jets. Look for Crowell to begin his season turnaround on Sunday. RB Mike Gillislee, New England Patriots. Gillislee is currently leading the league with 4 rushing touchdowns through the first 2 weeks of the season. It is very clear that he has taken over for LeGarrette Blount in the Patriots' offense, which is great news if you have Gillislee on your team. During his career in New England, Blount averaged over a touchdown and 14.5 fantasy points per game when the Patriots have won by a touchdown or more. New England enters Week 3 as 2-touchdown favorites over the Houston Texans, which should mean plenty of opportunities for Gillislee to score. The bruising running back is also leading the league in carries inside the 5, 10, and 20-yard lines, just like Blount did last year. If the Pats build up a big lead as expected, they will likely turn to Gillislee to help close out the game in the second half.